Okay, let's have a look at forward head posture and declining brain health as it relates to dog ownership.
Happening to you if you're not careful. And I just want to explain like all the terrible things that happen if you don't do something about your forward head posture and your cervical instability. So let's be honest, there's now more subscriptions for cell phones than there are people on the planet. So there's something like 7 or 8 billion cell phone subscriptions like in the United States. So basically everybody has a cell phone.
Everybody has a dog or two. Another thing that's increasing in our society is dog ownership. Not just dog ownership, but dogs at restaurants, motels, in schools, up in the house with little kids, and with senior citizens.
And I know there's parts of the world where there's poverty, and of course they don't, but between business account, home accounts, personal accounts, like there just is so much cell phone. So we're doing more and more stuff on the cell phone. With the cell phone, and we've all done this, and the person has forward head posture. So, in other words, the normal cervical curve, how God designed the human body.
Okay, did you guys hear that? How God designed the human body. So, where are the Christians on this? The way that we put our body into the compromising position that I'll show you guys later, it goes against the human body that God gave you. And if you don't believe in God, whatever, well, it's the human body that nature gave you.
Was to have a normal lordotic curve where the weight of the head is behind the curve. But when you look at a cell phone, this is basically what's happening. And then eventually you get so much
Or when you have a dog in your life that you're constantly looking at and taking pictures of. And now, yes, he's blaming the cell phone for this. But people are constantly using their cell phone to look at dogs, take pictures of their dogs, and look at other people's dogs. For example, go to YouTube, look up a Husky channel. There's a Husky channel where people film themselves in bed with Huskies all night long. And I don't mean in bed like in bed, I mean like they're supposed to sleep, but they keep waking up. They call it Sleeping with Huskies. That has like 2 million subscribers. So they're also using their cell phones to constantly look at dogs and take pictures of dogs.
ligament laxity, where then when you're upright, this is literally how you are. So, in other words, the cervical curve is reversed. And what happens long term is you end up like this gentleman, where your C1 is a full 3 inches in front of where it's supposed to be. And what ends up happening is that those 3 inches cause unbelievable stretching of the spinal cord. So this person has basically very little control of their legs. They have basically very little control of their legs. So that's going. Then when we did the neck vital analysis on the person, they have increased intracranial pressure. Then if you looked at their MRI, it was terrible. Their MRI of the brain was terrible. They had all these white matter lesions, which on the MRI report they said, oh, this is suggestive of a small vessel disease. It means that the white matter, the cortex of their brain is getting destroyed. Then
So what he's talking about is Alzheimer's.
if you looked at the sulcuses of their brain, they're really wide, meaning that the person's brain tissue mass is just plummeting. So, in other words, they don't have Alzheimer's yet, but they're on the brink. They're on the brink. So this is really serious stuff. It's really serious stuff. So, in other words,
Okay, now he's going to explain what happens when your neck goes forward. This is the carotid sheath right here.
the arterial supply to the brain, which is the carotid arteries, and it's the main drainage port of the brain, which is the internal jugular veins. So the person's on the cell phone. All of a sudden, there's so much neurologic activity because the first time in history, we're getting inundated with thousands and millions of images, and all those neurons. It's a high energy cost. The cost of neuron activity compared to other cells can be 2,500 times greater. So in other words, the brain, which takes up 20% of the cardiac output, the brain only weighs 2% of the human body, but it takes 20% of the blood supply. 20% of your blood supply.
Okay, I'll paraphrase him a little bit. He's explaining how your brain is going through lots of electrical activity, but it should be getting more blood and more free ability to move waste through that sheath that he was showing you earlier. But instead, the reverse happens. You get excessive activity in your brain from looking at images, and all of the blood that your brain should be getting and all the waste products that your brain should be getting rid of, it can't do that, and that's very damaging to your brain. And it's the same thing when you have a dog. You're constantly bent over looking at the dog. Oh, what do you want? What do you need? Oh my God, precious puppy. Bending over to take pictures of the dog. People have this like crazy love affair with dogs where they're just cooing over dogs all the time. It's very similar to being bent over looking at your cell phone.
Then the brain can't drain, well, all this cellular waste, it can't get out of the brain. So what's going to happen? The pressure inside the brain is going to go up, and the pressure eventually causes the nerve.
So have a look at all of the downstream effects of having this constant head forward posture. Cervical instability, decrease in blood supply to the brain, obstruction of the veno-lymphic drainage, intracranial pressure goes up, swelling of the optic nerve, breakdown of the blood-brain barrier, toxic metabolites accumulate in the brain. So when you go around with your head constantly forward, if you have diagnosed Alzheimer's or not, all of this stuff is happening at some level more and more every day of your life.
Degeneration or brain atrophy and
Yes, atrophy. I mentioned in my previous videos that dog culture lends to atrophy of the prefrontal lobe. And that's why dog owners kind of have a low intelligence, low empathy, zombie like behavior to them.
the long term, that does what? Your memory starts going, and eventually a person can get diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I'm not saying all Alzheimer's disease is from this. Obviously, there's a lot of research on it, but this obviously contributes to it, if not causes it.
Notice what he mentions right here.
And Alzheimer's disease used to be non existent. Now it's like, it's practically like every other person's going to get Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, Alzheimer's is through the roof right now. I made a point about this in Texas. And there's no way that cell phone use alone is causing all of this. But the head forward posture is a huge issue. So he talks about this x-ray you can get on your spine. I bet if we took the x-ray of people that have lots of dogs in their life or have had dogs for a long time, I bet they would have similar issues like what he's talking about. Check out what he says about how to set up your workstation to help prevent this.
With your workstation, make your workstation where you're standing up, right? You're standing up, you're not hunched over, because when you stand up, your posture is better. Then, lift your chest up, and then just have your computers.
Okay, so notice something. He didn't say go get yourself a rescue pit bull and stick it under your desk and bend over and baby talk it and give it treats all day. And that's what people do. They get these therapy office dogs and stick them under their desk or at other parts in the office. And then they'll take selfies of the dog all day while they're working. But when they're sitting in their chair, their head forward posture staring down at their dog. This is what we do all over the place. Bring therapy dogs into the office. Bent over, head forward posture. We're doing it to kids too, in schools and daycares. Bringing a dog in there so the kid can have bent over, head forward posture to stare at the dog. Bringing dogs into schools. Bent over, head forward posture of these kids. What do you think these people are doing when they have this dog down on the floor? They're going to be looking at it. Bent over, head forward posture to look at the dog. Same thing with people taking pictures of their dog all the time. They got to use their cell phone, which means they got that same head forward, bent over posture. Looking at other people's dogs, getting on Instagram looking at dogs. Bent over, head forward posture when you own a dog. Just like at any dog park, people are constantly bent over, head forward, just to look at the dog. People are constantly bringing more and more dogs into restaurants. Look at this guy. He's got his phone, so he's bent over to take a picture of his dog. And then that picture of his dog is going to go on Instagram. And then a bunch of more people, 10, 20, 30, 100 people, are going to be bent over looking at their phone because that guy took a picture of his dog. This is just a geometrically increasing problem with dog culture. So what's going on here? Looks like the guy's taking a picture of his pit bull at the restaurant. Head forward posture. Go look at any training video on YouTube. They're constantly walking around with this head forward posture. Head forward, head forward. I mean, it just makes obvious, perfect sense anyways. The dog is down here on the ground. You're up here. And then you're constantly having to pay attention to the dog, look at the dog, take selfies of the dog. And if you're not taking selfies of your dog, you're probably looking at selfies and videos of other people's dogs. Just look at literally anything that has to do with dogs, and it involves head forward posture. Any video that people put up on YouTube of their dogs requires them to have head forward, face forward, bent neck posture just to take the video of their dog. So, this person is what, 4'9" to 6 foot tall. They have to stand there looking down with their cell phone in front of them to take videos like this. And they do it all day. They get millions and millions of viewers. 820K subscribers on this one. But then people go watch that video, and again, the head forward posture just gets propagated and propagated out into humanity. Meanwhile, Alzheimer's goes through the roof. ADHD goes through the roof. And these things didn't used to be such a huge thing in society. And guess what else didn't used to be a huge thing in society? Spoiled dogs up in our yards and houses and beds. That's right. These dogs are a huge factor in driving some nasty health problems. And it's time for people to start looking into this.